So welcome to our study of 1 Corinthians. In this session, we're going to try and get through two major parts in the third chapter. And I'm still not sure how far we'll get through the whole letter in the course of our 12 weeks together. But we'll do as much as we can. And then, as I've said before, perhaps we can have another 12 weeks or so, whatever it takes, to complete our study of the whole letter. But tonight we're looking at verses 12 through 23 of 1 Corinthians. But let's begin with the first 17 verses. And there we read, "Now if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, the work of each builder will become visible, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed with fire. And the fire will test what sort of work each has done. If the work that someone has built on the foundation survives, the builder will receive a wage. If the work is burned up, the builder will suffer loss. The builder will be saved, but only as through fire. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person. For God's temple is holy, and you are that temple." I wonder if you, like myself, enjoy visiting ancient sites. But when you go to ancient sites, or if you go to museums that contain ancient artifacts, it does require something of a vivid imagination. Even when buildings and monuments have been meticulously restored, they rarely reflect the grandeur that first captivated their builders. The last time I was in London, I went to the British Museum, and there I had a walk around what is called the Elgin Marbles. And I was trying to picture the Elgin Marbles in their rightful place in Athens, instead of confined to a room in the British Museum. I was looking at some photographs recently of the remains of ancient synagogues in the Middle East. And I was trying to imagine these buildings bustling with worshippers, people engaged in prayer and discussion and community. Looking at some of the ancient buildings in Rome is difficult, but we can almost imagine standing before the great Senate building erected by Julius Caesar. But when you look at it today, I've only seen it in photographs, but it's all bricks and mortar. But at the time of his building, it was resplendent in marble, shining in the sun. This is the essence of experiencing history, seeing beyond the ruins to the glory that once was. The building materials Paul refers to in our verse 12 are essential elements for adorning or constructing a remarkable edifice. Solomon's temple was an awe-inspiring structure. It was lavishly decorated with gold and silver and precious stones. And then when Herod the Great and his heirs undertook the temple's reconstruction, they poured their efforts into restoring its former glory, that of Solomon. Now, while Paul explicitly mentions the temple only in verses 16 and 17, I think it's evident that he has in mind throughout this entire passage the temple. This building that he calls symbolizes the collaborative endeavor of Paul and other dedicated Christian workers who are committed to erecting a spiritual masterpiece. The notion of the temple as a vibrant community of believers, rather than merely a physical structure of bricks and mortar, was not a novel idea introduced by Paul. The Dead Sea Scrolls echo this perspective. They portray their community in a similar light. And during this period, many Jews felt that the existing temple in Jerusalem was under divine judgment. They believed that God would initiate a transformative work, which might encompass the construction of a new physical building, but would undoubtedly lead to the birth of a new community, one composed of individuals profoundly changed by God's saving grace. And what I haven't done is to share my screen. So here we are. That's our text we're working with, and that's my outline. Now, just as God's presence once resided within the temple, and it was referred to as the Shekinah, or tabernacling presence, Paul asserts that God's Spirit now dwells within the Christian community. This truth positions them as the true embodiment of the temple in what is known as the age to come, a transformative era that has already, in fact, begun. And the passage brings out the critical role of those who construct this temple. And it also highlights the significant dangers that they face, not only in employing the improper materials, but also the grave risk of entirely dismantling the building, as indicated in verse 17. If this edifice is truly God's temple, then to destroy such a sacred space is nothing short of sacrilege. And a recent commentator, I think, aptly noted that while faulty builders might escape with merely singed eyebrows, when the fires of judgment come, those who actively work to tear down this holy structure may ultimately meet their own ruin. The stakes are indeed high. The integrity of the temple demands vigilant stewardship. But what is the significance, I wonder, of fire in this discussion? Does it connect, as some people, as many people suggest, to the long-standing belief popularized by the Roman Catholic Church during the Middle Ages and still embraced by many today, that purgatory serves as a transformative state after death, refining Christians to be holy and worthy of entering God's presence? At a deeper level, this passage is not intended to address all Christians universally. Instead, it serves as a powerful warning specifically for those who have taken it upon themselves the responsibility of living their lives serving within God's church. Those actively engage in nurturing and building up the community. Paul frequently employs the metaphor of building up the church, a theme we will explore further in 1 Corinthians if we get there, particularly in chapter 14. He emphasizes that while it is impossible to engage in this vital work, the manner in which we do so can vary greatly. We can either contribute meaningfully or we can falter in our efforts. Ultimately, the outcomes of our work will be revealed, highlighting the importance of our commitment and the impact we have on the faith community. To illustrate this point, perhaps, Paul describes two distinct types of building materials. The first, gold, silver, and precious stones. They are resilient and can endure flames, while the second, wood, hay, and straw, are notoriously flammable, aren't they? He ties this imagery to the well-known Old Testament warning of an imminent fire. Throughout its history, Israel has faced the devastation of literal fires, often ignited by foreign invaders who wreaked havoc, sometimes even upon the temple itself. But the pressing question is whether the building of the church, the collective effort of himself, Apollos, and others, will ultimately be deemed valuable. The day that looms ahead, which will reveal the quality of each person's labor. Verse 13, unmistakably, I would say, refers to the day of the Lord, mentioned earlier in chapter 1 and verse 8. It is on that day that the true nature of each individual's contributions will be illuminated. Various workers have engaged in the construction, employing different materials. The forthcoming fire will not only consume some aspects, but will also refine other aspects. Those whose work is reduced to ashes will suffer loss. The term Paul uses here suggests the penalties that a builder might face when held accountable for shoddy craftsmanship. This stark reality, then, emphasizes the importance of building with materials of lasting worth, urging us to consider the impact of our efforts in building the church. And I think once we recognize that this passage fundamentally addresses various forms of building, specifically the endeavor to build up the church, we can also see it as a reflection of Paul's insight on God's judgment of each individual according to their works. And here I would refer you to Romans 2, 5 through 11, 14, 10 through 12, and 2 Corinthians 5:10. But it's crucial to highlight two significant points in this context. First, there is no conflict between Paul's belief in future judgment based on works and his doctrine of justification by faith. So Romans 3, 21 to 31, Galatians 2, 15 to 21, and other places. The essence of justification by faith is that it projects forward into the present the verdict that God will render on the final day. Paul firmly asserts that those who are justified by faith in the present will have that verdict reaffirmed in the future, taking into account the entirety of their lives in the meantime, whether brief or abundant. So Philippians 1:6. While Paul primarily addresses individuals who actively contribute, whether positively or negatively, to the growth of the church, it is essential to recognize that this vision undoubtedly extends to all Christians. So, While the fire performs its purifying work, he asserts builders who have relied on inferior materials will indeed undoubtedly face loss. Yet they themselves will still find salvation. But this illustrates Paul's understanding of Christian assurance. Those whom God justified, he also glorified. He expresses this in Old Romans 8 and 29. At the same time, he underscores the gravity of Christian responsibility. Responsibility for one's actions in the new life bestowed through the Spirit, which commences with faith and baptism. This dual perspective reinforces the idea that while grace guarantees salvation, our choices and efforts in this new life do hold significant importance. Secondly, we can interpret the image of fire, understanding that this is metaphorical. Paul isn't speaking of a literal fire. We can understand this image as a biblical representation of the traditional doctrine of purgatory, aimed to express, albeit often in an unhelpful manner. Recently, prominent Roman Catholic theologians have revisited this passage, proposing that the notions of a singular moment of judgment in which all remaining impurities are consumed by fire might indeed capture the true essence of the original doctrine of purgatory. So they've changed their minds. If such an insight had been articulated 500 years ago, the Reformation itself might have been rendered unnecessary. The Reformers held that death, termed the last enemy in 1 Corinthians 15:26, conclusively completed uh, it conclusively completed the purification of the Christian from lingering sin. Paul's imagery harmonizes remarkably well with this profound understanding. But the crux of the matter lies in the seriousness with which Paul addresses the responsibilities of Christians, particularly those who serve as leaders and teachers within the church. This is no trivial pursuit. We are engaged in matters of eternal significance. One can build with wisdom, with purpose, and the finest materials, forging a foundation that endures, but conversely, one can also construct recklessly or with inferior materials, resulting in consequences that can be dire and lasting. It is essential, my friends, to recognize the weight of our choices in this endeavor. It is possible actually to pull down the building altogether. And God takes these responses, these possibilities very seriously. And so should we. We're still in the main section of chapters 1 through 4 of 1 Corinthians. And although we seem to have wandered into a new area of thought from the initial argument that Paul was trying to express concerning divisions, I think we can see in this passage and the one to follow that he's getting to the nub of what causes these divisions. It begins with the whole mindset of those who would want to or believe they have something to contribute to the building of the church. and who perhaps see things differently from others, but in order to get their own way, they try to garner support from followers. Paul is laying down a line here saying you don't take these responsibilities of building within the Lord's church lightly. They're not for your personal um, elevation. They're not simply to make you look good in the face of others. And he will continue going deeper into the problems of division and showing how it begins within the hearts of individuals and how those hearts need to be changed. Because he goes on to say that everything belongs to you. In 1 Corinthians 3:18 through 23, do not deceive yourselves. If you think you are wise in this age, you should become fools, so that you may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, for it is written, He catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are futile. So let no one boast about people, for all things are yours, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas, or the world or life or death, or the present or the future, all are yours. And you are Christ's, and Christ is God's. Here's a quotation, one that I particularly like. It isn't a matter of knowing that you've got it all together. You haven't. It's a matter of knowing that somewhere it is all together and that you are part of it. Striking a balance between humility and confidence can be quite a challenge. If we come over sounding too confident, people may think that we're being pushy, that we're trying to draw the spotlight amongst ourselves. But if we chastise ourselves to the point and say, I must be more humble, then we might never, ever make a real positive contribution to the works that we're involved in. And the world around us often pressurizes us into either dismiss our knowledge or adopt a fragile, overconfident attitude. I was listening to some press conferences attended by politicians, and they sound so confident, so self-assured. Nothing can possibly go wrong if you'll just do things the way that I say they should be done. Yet, genuine Christian faith calls us to something deeper than just sounding and behaving in a super confident way. It might, in fact, invite us to embrace what might seem foolish, as Paul suggests, in order that we might attain true wisdom. Moreover, it encourages us to celebrate the remarkable truth that all things are yours, all while understanding that you belong to the Messiah and Messiah belongs to God. Now, can we get our heads around the profound truths that Paul conveying through these statements? He's making a very definite conclusion about the peril of boasting about human beings, a peril into which the Corinthian church has plunged deeply, well out of their depth. They proudly proclaim, I belong to Paul. I belong to Apollos, elevating these Christian teachers to the status of owners over their groups of disciples, much like the philosophers, the sophists, and the wisdom teachers of their time. However, beyond the many flaws in their perspective, Paul goes on and on and on about a crucial truth. This mindset is not only misguided, but undermines their own potential. And that's the really sad point. It's not they who belong to these teachers, rather, these teachers belong to them. Furthermore, everything else belongs to them as well, except for the Messiah and, of course, God Himself. Now, what are the implications could he be alluding to? The idea resonates deeply within the framework of Jewish thought. According to this belief, those who are truly part of God's people are destined to reign over the world in faithful obedience to Him when the age to come unfolds in its fullness. As we read through the book of Revelation, we hear echoes of ancient promises made to Israel. God's people will emerge as kings and priests in the new world. And that's in Revelation 1:6, with a direct connection with Exodus 19:6. This vision highlights the profound significance of the believer's role in the divine plan. Pagan philosophies have long suggested that individuals can be kings in their own right, provided they learn to master themselves and uncover their true purpose in the world. Yet Paul's promise, deeply rooted, as I say, in Jewish tradition, transcends anything offered by wider society. The apostles are yours. They do not possess the church. Rather, as Paul emphasized just as a few verses earlier, they are the church's devoted servants, those through whom you came to believe, verse 5. But this extends beyond the apostles. It encompasses the very world itself. Paul firmly rejects any dualistic notion that views the created world as evil. The God who fully revealed himself in and as Jesus of Nazareth is the same God who crafted the universe. By belonging to him, Christians not only inherit the world, but are also empowered, as Jesus proclaimed in Matthew 5:5 and 1 Corinthians 6:2. And it's there in 1 Corinthians 6:2, Paul boldly asserts that God's people will judge the world. What a thought. This inheritance and authority are amazing gifts that speak to the transformative power of faith and the divine purpose that awaits those who believe. I use that word very often, I've noticed, transformative. But that is exactly what the gospel entails, transforming us. Be renewed, says Paul, by the changing of your mind or by the transformation of your mind. Each Christian and each group of Christians as a church embody the essence of resurrection, grounded in a profound hope provided by the gospel message of Jesus' resurrection. Their significance is undeniable. The present and future are firmly in their grasp. Even amidst the turmoil of this present evil age, they are assured of their rightful place in the age to come. Now, importantly, they are not mere background figures in a story that centers on someone else. They are the true protagonists of this divine story. And that puts us as believers, faithful baptized believers, at the very heart, at the very center of God's divine work. I suppose we could consider the Corinthians like people, and here I'm quoting N.T. Wright, floundering in a murky puddle while a vast ocean of opportunity lay just beyond their reach. They chose to slip from a tainted tap when they could have savoured the finest wine and crystal clear mountain spring water. N.T. Wright can get very poetical at times. It's astonishing to see them caught up in personality cults, behaving like mere squabbling philosophers and sophists, while the entire cosmos, brimming with truth, mystery, and wisdom, awaits their discovery. Temptations may promise the world, yet deliver nothing but disappointment. Satan entices with grand illusions, only to ridicule those who fail to attain them, while God stands ready to bestow the brilliance of the sun itself. Embrace the vast possibilities that await you and choose wisely, is Paul's message. And it is crucial, according to Paul, to get everything in the right order. Paul, in several passages, develops a way of speaking about the Messiah and God simultaneously. This approach allows him to assert two key points. First, that Jesus, the Messiah, stands on God's side, in contrast to the entire world and the rest of humanity. And second, that Jesus remains distinct from the God whom he refers to elsewhere as the Father or the Creator. Paul did not take time to compose a lengthy treatise explaining how these concepts work philosophically, nor did he need to. It sufficed for him to repeatedly state that when Christians look beyond the world and their own lives, they see not a distant or unapproachable deity, or a vague divine force that is hard to comprehend, but the God of Israel, the Creator God, who has revealed himself through Jesus. And we don't need to grasp every detail of how it all works. What truly matters is our belief in its power. The evidence of Jesus' resurrection stands as a testament to this reality, affirming that you are invited to be part of it. And as Paul expresses, this very belief serves as a clear sign. It's a clear sign that God's Spirit, the Spirit of his Son Jesus, resides within you. This makes you an essential part of his temple, a vibrant community dedicated to worshipping and glorifying Him. My friends, if I was to make a request of us all tonight, I would simply say, embrace this truth and let it transform your life. All human wisdom is rendered powerless by the divine absurdity of the gospel. Verses 18 through 20 in our text not only summarize but also strengthen the argument Paul has been constructing right from the very beginning of the letter, bolstered here by additional biblical quotations. And accompanying this summary is an urgent command that resonates just as strongly today. Do not deceive yourself. The tendency to fall into self-deception is all too common, and the consequences can be profoundly damaging. Ironically, it is often those who are most confident they are immune to self-deception who are at the greatest risk of falling into its trap.